Thank you. And I call Mrs Judith Cochrane to move amendment number 1.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to speak on this issue today and to bring forward the Alliance Party amendment. Firstly, we should be clear that Northern Ireland is not the only region being adversely affected by cuts, and the reality is that the pressure on public finances will increase in coming years. We therefore need to have a sound strategy in place to ensure that we can continue to deliver our frontline services. Also, as it's widely recognised that fiscal contractions are best addressed with a ratio of spending cuts and revenue raising, the 2015-16 budget, however, was predicated on a cuts-only basis. The substantive motion today essentially acknowledges what Alliance has previously said, and that there is a need for some revenue raising. It also reiterates a key recommendation from the Committee for Finance and Personnel's report on the draft budget, namely calling on the Executive to prepare and publish a consultation paper on the options across all departments for raising additional revenue, setting out all of the benefits, risks and impacts on the economy, consumers and the most vulnerable. Alliance, however, does not believe that this should be done in isolation. Fair revenue-raising structures must go hand in hand with other reforms, and that is why we have sought to amend the motion today. If we're going to take additional money off people, they have a right to know that the money is being well spent. With no real attempt to address the cost of division or make our public services more efficient, it would be unfair on those whose money we are seeking. Furthermore, most revenue-raising options will be trivial in the overall amounts of money, so we must also review expenditure and be open to new ways of delivering our services in order to tackle waste. The current scale of expenditure on education and health is so great that we need urgent strategies to manage these costs. Indeed, I've already asked OFM-DFM if they would consider reallocating the resources associated with the junior ministerial posts in their department to posts, for example, in the Department of Health, to allow much greater focus to be given on this important task, but the idea was rejected. The fact remains, however, that while there is a case for some degree of protection in the health and education budgets, there is significant scope for reform, and there needs to be greater transparency so that the Assembly can determine whether a consistent approach to prioritising service delivery is being taken across every department. We need to be careful not to simply continue to allocate resources to a sector that is under pressure without expecting it to properly pursue its efficiency agenda. Mr Speaker, we don't need to start from scratch, as some useful work has already been undertaken. For example, in health, the McKinsey and Appleby reports and the Compton Review have set out areas for improvements, but serious political commitment is required if we are to take these forward. Likewise, Alliance believes that a serious commitment to promoting integration within the education system will produce significant financial savings. This would include addressing the cost of maintaining 70,000 empty school places and enabling funding to be directed towards pupils rather than sustaining a divided estate. Mr Speaker, the challenge of reform is of course not limited to the Department of Health and Education, and it is very clear that the deteriorating resource position will necessitate proactive measures across all departments to reduce the size of the public sector pay bill. Figures over previous years have shown that the pay bill has continued to increase over and above inflation, despite the so-called pay freeze. And if the system can absorb 30 million of sick pay without a noticeable reduction in output, then there are clearly efficiencies to be made. And every department should be constantly challenging how things are done to ensure that services are being delivered in the most cost-effective manner. The proposed voluntary exit scheme is designed to reduce the number of civil servants. But if we are admitting that we have more staff than we need, then we also need to consider an approach that will remove the least effective workers rather than simply the oldest. On the other hand, if many of the jobs are critical, other options are going to need to be explored. For example, 4-day weeks, pay cuts for the top earners, removing incremental rises for no extra work output, etc. These may be controversial, but in order to deliver frontline services on a more sustainable footing, they need to be considered. Mr Speaker, Alliance has long advocated that the Executive must tackle division and sectarianism in Northern Ireland, and it's not just because of our strong support for promoting integration and a shared future, but because we know that a divided society costs more to run. And this was recognised in the Together Building a United Community document, and also the recent Stormont House Agreement stated that there should be an audit of departmental spending to address or identify how divisions in society impact on the delivery of services, and to consider how best to reconfigure service delivery in a manner consistent with a shared future. And this commitment must be progressed. We simply cannot ask people to contribute additional revenue to the Executive if it is being allocated to public services which are sustaining a divided society or are not operating efficiently. It's a major challenge, but it's one which the people of Northern Ireland expect our Executive to deliver on. So what then are the Alliance proposals for revenue raising? It's not the first time I've spoken on these matters in the Chamber, and I'm sure it won't be the last time that the Minister will seek to misrepresent what I say. Firstly, to date, there has been no attempt to reduce spending on subsidies which disproportionately affect wealthier people. We believe that these inappropriate subsidies should not be a priority for public expenditure and that they divert resources away from public services which assist the vulnerable. The subsidies that we believe can be redirected into other services are, for example, free prescriptions for those who can afford it. We need to return to a system where prescription charges are levied from people who can afford it, although with a wide range of exemptions. And already we've seen the DUP make a move to our way of thinking on this. Another issue would be the removal of the rates subsidy on those houses worth more than $400,000, which could raise about $4 million a year, and Sinn Féin are now following our lead on that as well. Taking such decisions would be a first step in demonstrating that the Executive was serious about tackling such subsidies for the wealthy in order to protect services which benefit the less wealthy. Alliance also believes that in the longer term, some further forms of fair revenue raising are likely to be necessary. This may be through the domestic charges, either rates or water, but the key point is that any such measures should be fair, with adequate planning to ensure that they are implemented in a gradual manner. In the case of water charging, for example, there would be a reduction in rates in the first year so that people are not paying twice for a service. Our view is that... Go ahead.
Thank you, Member, for giving way. Just before the member gets too much into the situation as regards water rates, you mentioned about inappropriate subsidies, and you've given two examples. Where would Alliance stand, for instance, on the issue of free transport for the elderly?
We have firmly said that we are supportive of the free public transport for the elderly. However, it is a current situation where as soon as you are 60, you get a free bus pass. Do you agree that, through the Chair, through the Speaker, do you agree that those people who are maybe earning £50,000 to £60,000 a year can have a free bus pass to get themselves into work? Is that what we should be protecting? I'll carry on. Our view is that revenue that is raised from those that can afford it should therefore be spent on public services and job creation. Finally, Mr Speaker, I will comment on the amendment proposed by the DUP. The Alliance Party has always been a supporter of greater fiscal devolution because it has the potential to increase the efficiency and responsiveness of the government. Our motives for greater fiscal devolution should be made to make sure we have the tools to deliver our policy aims, and our priority should be to seek the devolution of any powers where there is expected to be a clear benefit to the people of Northern Ireland. For example, we supported the devolution of APD on direct long-haul flights as a means to lower the tax for flights into Northern Ireland, but we take a slightly different approach in relation to short-haul APD powers, as these costs could be in the region of 60 to 90 million per annum. And while there's nothing essentially wrong with the proposed amendment from the DUP, it really only reiterates work that is already ongoing. And therefore, I would urge members instead to support the Alliance amendment, which seeks to ensure that the Executive collectively lives up to the challenges in the Stormont House Agreement and guarantees that all departments, not just one or two, reduce the wasteful spending by reconfiguring service delivery in a manner consistent with a shared future. At the end of the day, unlike other governments, the Executive's budget remains largely unrelated to the success of our economic policy, and currently we face no financial penalty for failing to create a shared future and stimulate our economy fully. We may not be held to account each year through our tax take, however we are accountable for tax waste, and we owe it to the people of Northern Ireland to address this and feed those savings into better public services for all. Thank you.